So, okay, one of the big parts of being in a school is, of course, creating goals for our students that are effective. And I know that SLP Toolkit has a SMART goal generator. So, first, can you break down exactly what a SMART goal is, a refresher for all those who've been out of grad school for a while? And how does this generator work? I watched the Vimeo video on your website and I was fascinated. I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, so the goal bank was created for me because I am a terrible goal writer since even grad school, early days. The concept, I don't know why, it is always something I have struggled with, how you pick that one specific objective and write it in a measurable way. Always just kind of eluded me. And for various reasons, I either wanted to write kind of these mega goals where I incorporated all these things, or I wanted to get real wordy. I felt like the more words made it more clear, which couldn't be further from the truth. And so we really thought we didn't want a goal bank that just listed out a bunch of pre-written goals, because obviously we know the IEP, the I stands for individualized. And so those goal banks, while they're great for kind of giving you some ideas, they may not really help you create a goal that's specific to that student's needs. And so the idea behind it was we wanted to put it in a way that helps you to create this SMART goal. And I'm really glad that you sent over some questions ahead of time so that I could remember what SMART stands for, because if you had asked me on the spot, I probably would have froze. But SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based.
Nice job.
Way to go.
Bouffoir.
Thank you.
Gold star.
That's right. And so the idea is that first piece, we need it to be a specific objective, and it needs to be something observable, right? So we've got to make sure we're using really concrete verbs. And so that very first drop down in our goal generator lists out, so you go to the content area. So we've got everything in there from vocabulary, articulation, pragmatics, fluency, whatever the case. You go to that content area. And then that first drop down gives you those concrete verbs and that one skill. So if you're targeting something like categories, it may, in that first drop down, say something, list 3 items in a
designated category.
Yeah. And so that's the first thing. So what's the one skill I'm going to target? And the next part is it prompts you to go through a drop down of what is the supports I'm going to give that child. Am I expecting them to do it independently with a verbal prompt, with a visual cue? And again, that needs to be very specific. You know, we'll see things where it says the child will do X with max support. And that isn't measurable unless I know what max support is. Now, obviously, I could have a chart that shows me what they mean by max support, but really thinking of what is that one specific support that I'm going to provide that child. And then the next part is the criterion. So how am I going to measure progress? And so, you know, a lot of us like the percentage goals, but it's not the only way to measure progress on a goal. So there's also opportunities tracked, frequency, whatever makes the most sense for that goal that you're targeting. And again, these are just drop downs. So it's guiding your thinking of how to compose this goal. And so after criterion, then it's the idea of how are you going to measure it? So am I using my SLP data? Am I using a criterion reference test or a rubric? Am I using a checklist? Am I using a speech sample? And so once you kind of go through those drop downs, then when you hit create, it's going to write that in a very simple, clear goal. And we talk a lot about goals because it is the one thing that I think impacts data collection more than anything else is when you have a goal that is not really objective and measurable, taking data collection or data on it is nearly impossible.
I love this because I feel like it's almost like, you know, we're teaching kids skills, but we also, as SLPs, we need to learn skills as well. And I'm thinking about this as like a prompting hierarchy. I'm like, great. So I have a field of choices that then I get to select one. And then I have this visual cue. And then I have the support. And like, maybe then if I continue to do this, then you have an SLP who's using SLP Toolkit in the first year of their career. And by year 2 or 3 of their career, they're having this generator in their head and they're able to create a SMART goal independently.
Exactly.
And so it's like they're practicing using this higher level of support. And I can imagine that for a lot of SLPs, like this ease of, generation is always helpful, but after a while, it helps them be better SMART goal creators independently, which is great.
Absolutely. Yeah, because again, we can't be the one solely responsible for coming up with every possible goal you might use on an IEP. And so while we tried to be as comprehensive as possible when we created those specific objectives you may target, there's going to be times where you've got a kid who shows up who's doing something, you've never seen before. And so the idea is if you've been using that, then it's going to help you just put your own objective into that one spot, that's missing.
That's the app in general, though.
Yeah.
We look at this as scaffolding thinking. It's not meant to replace a therapist and your clinical judgment. It's just meant to help guide you so you don't forget these things. These are all things that we know, but when you're in the thick of it, you can forget a couple things. So.
Well, and I can see this being so beneficial, whether you're a new grad or a seasoned therapist, because I know it's one of those where who do I need to go back to in my past and apologize to for that terribly written goal? And then I know we've all received those where you're thinking, what is this? What were they thinking? And so I'm thinking as a new grad, like Alyssa said, you're developing your goal writing skills. And so you're learning and you're creating those really great goals from the beginning. So then for your career, what you need to do. But also for those seasoned therapists where I feel like what happens sometimes is, just talking to a therapist earlier who's like, I feel like, 50% of the kids on my caseload need to not be in services anymore, but it's just this same goal keeps getting passed on year after year. And it's just what you do. It's like, oh, I'll just change the percentage next year. I'll just change the, how verbal cues, max assist, minimum, it's these little changes. And then it just year after year after year keeps getting passed on. And so even if you're a seasoned therapist, just refreshing that, oh, I don't have to keep writing this same goal the same way I always have.